Ethan had braces then, barely 15, still shy about smiling fully. She lingered on his younger face. Now it was just the two of them. The funeral had passed 2 days ago. Friends and neighbors had come by with warm condolences and casserole dishes, their words soft and rehearsed. Rachel had nodded, smiled faintly, and whispered the expected thank yous, but she couldn't remember much. Everything had moved in a haze, like someone else was living it for her. A scent of lilies still lingered in the air, mingling with the faint smell of cologne on Daniel's coat that hung untouched by the front door. She hadn't had the heart to move it. In the kitchen, a half-drunk mug of coffee sat cold on the counter. Rachel didn't remember making it. From down the hall, Ethan's door was closed. He hadn't come out since morning. She had knocked, once, just a soft tap, and asked if he needed anything. His reply had been a short, muffled, "I'm fine." It wasn't the words that worried her, but the tone, flat, empty. She knew her son too well to believe him. Rachel wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and moved toward the window. The garden outside had overgrown slightly. Daniel had always taken care of the trimming. The rosebush looked wild now, stretching in all directions. Rachel made a mental note to prune it, though she knew she wouldn't do it anytime soon. She sat down slowly on the couch, the springs groaning beneath her. Everything felt foreign now, even her own body, her hands, her breath, her tears that refused to come. For the past week, she hadn't cried. Not properly. People had assumed she was strong, holding it together for Ethan, but the truth was, she felt hollow. The pain hadn't found a way out yet. It just lived inside her, sitting quietly, like a tenant that had no plans of leaving. And Ethan, he hadn't cried either, not at the hospital, not at the funeral, not when he touched his father's casket with trembling fingers. But Rachel had seen the way his eyes lingered a little too long on Daniel's old watch, the way he sat in the garage for hours, staring at the dusty tool bench they used to fix things together. He was grieving in silence, and she didn't know how to reach him. Rachel leaned back, letting her head rest against the cushions. Through the hallway, she could see a sliver of light beneath Ethan's door. He was awake. She thought about knocking again, about sitting beside him and saying nothing at all, just being there. But she stayed seated. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe then they could begin to learn how to breathe again. The next morning arrived heavy with fog. Rachel woke to the faint clinking of dishes in the kitchen. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it. But then it came again, the unmistakable sound of a mug being set on the counter. She sat up, the ache in her lower back reminding her of another night spent in restless sleep. When she entered the kitchen, she found Ethan already dressed, his broad frame hunched slightly over the sink. His hair was messy, like he hadn't bothered with the comb, and his hoodie, Daniel's old college sweatshirt, hung loosely from his shoulders. "Morning," Rachel said softly, almost afraid to disturb the silence between them. He glanced over, his eyes tired but not cold. "Hey?" She opened the cabinet for her coffee mug, deliberately choosing the plain white one Daniel always used. It was chipped along the rim, but she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. She poured the last of the coffee into it, not offering to share. He didn't ask. For a while, neither of them said anything. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Ethan broke the silence first. "I cleaned up the garage a little." Rachel looked at him, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "It was a mess." She nodded slowly. "Your dad always meant to organize it better. He just never got around to it." "Yeah." Ethan's voice was quiet, a bit flat. "There was a box of his old jackets. I didn't touch it." Rachel's fingers tightened around her mug. "Thank you." He sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the surface like it might offer answers. His fingers traced a small scratch in the wood, the kind Daniel used to say gave the table character. But Rachel joined him. She sat across from her son, and for the first time in days, they faced each other fully. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said gently. He didn't look up. "I figured." "It's okay not to know what to say. I don't either." Ethan let out a breath that was half sigh, half something else. "I don't want to talk about him. Not right now." "Things I understand." "But I miss him," he added quickly, like the words were slipping out before he could change his mind. Rachel reached across the table and placed her hand over his. He flinched at first, then relaxed into her touch. Listen, I miss him too, every second. His jaw tensed. I hate how quiet the house feels. Me too. I keep waiting to hear his car pull up, Ethan confessed, his voice breaking just slightly. Like, I know he's gone, but my brain keeps expecting him. Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. Sometimes I still think he's gonna walk in and ask what's for dinner. They shared a small, fragile laugh, the kind that only grief can summon. Tired and honest and a little broken. I don't know how to do this, Ethan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel squeezed his hand. We figure it out together, one step at a time. But the first time since the funeral, she saw something shift in his eyes. Not a full light, but the hint of something softer, something willing. He nodded slowly. Okay, it wasn't a solution, it wasn't even a plan, but it was a start. And in the face of all they'd lost, that was something. Later that week, Rachel found herself standing outside Ethan's bedroom door, unsure whether to knock or walk away. It had been years since she'd entered without asking. He valued his space, and she had always respected that. But this time felt different. She needed to understand the corners of his world she had overlooked, the ones Daniel used to reach better than she did. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. The room smelled faintly of old cologne and clean laundry. Posters still clung to the walls, faded album covers and vintage movie prints Daniel had once helped hang. The desk was cluttered with notebooks, an open sketch pad, and a pair of headphones tangled into a knot. But what caught her eye was the dusty football on the shelf above his bed. It hadn't been touched in months. Not since the injury that benched Ethan senior year. And not since Daniel quietly accepted Ethan's choice to step away from the sport. Rachel had never fully understood what that moment meant to them. But standing here now, she realized it had been one of their unspoken bridges. She sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the worn quilt. Daniel had picked it out when Ethan was 12, claiming it would make the room feel like a cabin retreat. It still had that earthy, quiet comfort to it. A soft knock on the open door startled her. Ethan stood there, a bag of groceries in one hand. You okay? Rachel nodded. Yeah, I just hadn't been in here in a while. He set the bag down and walked in slowly, his expression unreadable. I forgot how much of your dad is in here, she said. He shrugged, then sat next to her. I haven't really changed much. It feels like if I move anything, it'll be like he's more gone. Rachel looked at him. That's okay. It's okay to hold on to things that help you feel close to him. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. Some days, I want to box it all up, start over. And other days, believe it exactly the way it is. Rachel smiled gently. Both of those feelings are valid. They sat in silence for a while. The kind that didn't need filling. The kind where grief softened into presence. I used to talk to him, Ethan admitted suddenly. After he died, just in my head, in here. Rachel blinked. What did you say? Everything. Stupid things. Like how the Lakers were playing. Or how I failed that bio quiz. I'd sit here and pretend he was listening. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I talked to him too. Ethan looked surprised. You do? She nodded. In the mornings, while I make coffee, I say good morning, sometimes complain about the news. It's silly, but it's not silly, Ethan said quickly. It helps. Rachel took a slow breath. Would you mind if we did it together sometime? Just talked about him? He hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. The weight between them shifted slightly, not lifted, but moved like two people carrying something heavy, finally realizing they could carry it together. Rachel stood to leave, her hand brushing gently over the dusty football. Let's make tacos tonight, like he used to. Ethan smiled. With way too much cheese? And those terrible canned jalapenos he loved? I chuckled. I'll chop the onions. He always made you cry with those. Still does, Rachel murmured. And this time the tears fell. But not in sorrow, in memory. And in the quiet that followed, healing didn't feel so far away. The sizzle of onions in the pan filled the kitchen, mixing with the faint rhythm of an old jazz playlist Daniel used to love. Rachel hadn't played it in months. It had felt too personal, too steeped in memories. But tonight, something about its low swing and soft brass made it feel right again. Ethan stood across from her, slicing jalapenos with careful precision, though he paused occasionally to steal glances at her. It was the first time in a while they were cooking together. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It felt lived in, like the familiar pauses in Daniel's favorite songs. You remember that one time Dad burned the tacos because he got distracted by that pop game? Ethan asked, grinning. Rachel laughed and then blamed the oven for being too enthusiastic. He smoked out the entire kitchen. Ethan's grin widened. We ended up ordering pizza with jalapenos, of course. They both laughed, and it wasn't the strained laughter of trying to fill an awkward space. It was real, raw in its simplicity. When the food was ready, they brought their plates to the dining table. It was the same table where Daniel had sat every evening, always asking how their days had been, even when he was bone tired. Rachel instinctively glanced at his old seat. Now empty, but not forgotten. I keep expecting him to walk in and ask why I didn't make guacamole, Ethan said quietly, tapping his fork against the plate. Rachel nodded. He never made it himself, but he always complained when it was missing. They both fell into silence, chewing slowly, letting the moment speak louder than their words. As they finished eating, Rachel leaned back in her chair. I've been thinking about getting away for a weekend, she said. Just somewhere close. Maybe the lake house we used to rent. Ethan looked up, surprised. You haven't mentioned that place in years. I know. But I thought maybe it could help. Just a change of scene, some fresh air, and maybe we talk about the things we don't usually say out loud. He paused. You want me to come with you? Only if you want to. No pressure. He considered this, then gave a small nod. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Rachel exhaled, grateful for the openness between them. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it was no longer a silent wedge. Later that evening, as she loaded the dishwasher, Rachel noticed something unexpected. Ethan had left a folded note on the counter with her name on it. Her heart tightened as she picked it up, unsure what it could be. She opened it slowly. I know I don't say it much, but thank you. Not just for tonight, or the tacos, or pretending not to notice when I disappear into myself. Thank you for staying strong when I couldn't, for not giving up on us. I don't always know how to show it, but I see you. I miss them too, maybe more than I know how to admit. But having you here makes it hurt less. Love, Ethan. Rachel clutched the note to her chest, her eyes stung with tears she didn't need to hide anymore. He saw her in that small gesture, a quiet note, a vulnerable truth. He had given her something she didn't even know she needed. Recognition and a sense of not being alone in her grief. That night, as she lay in bed, Rachel felt the stillness of the house not as emptiness, but as space. Space that held echoes of love, and now the beginnings of healing. They left early Saturday morning, just after sunrise. Rachel had packed 2 small bags the night before, one for her, one for Ethan, and made sure to bring the old Polaroid camera Daniel used to love. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was hope. The drive to the lake house was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Ethan put on an old playlist from his phone, soft folk music, Daniel's kind of music, and Rachel let herself sink into the rhythm of the road and the gentle melody. For the first time in a while, she didn't feel the need to fill the silence. It was enough that they were both there. The lake house hadn't changed much. Same weathered wooden steps, same slightly crooked porch light, same faded blue shutters. Rachel stood on the front deck for a moment, breathing in the crisp lake air. It smelled like pine and damp earth and something sweet she couldn't quite name. Made peace. Feels smaller than I remember, Ethan said as he carried their bags inside. Rachel smiled. That's because last time we came, you were 10 and convinced it was a castle. They spent the first hour dusting off cobwebs, opening windows, airing out the rooms. By midday, sunlight poured into every corner of the house, casting soft golden beams across the wooden floor. Rachel made sandwiches for lunch, and they ate on the back deck facing the lake. The water was still, like glass, only broken by the occasional ripple of a fish or the distant cry of a loon. After they ate, Ethan asked if they could take the canoe out. Rachel hesitated. She hadn't touched it since Daniel passed, but she nodded. He steadied the canoe while she climbed in, then pushed off, paddling slowly toward the center of the lake. The world quieted around them. No traffic, no emails, no memories shouting over each other. Just the sound of the paddle dipping in and out of the water. I used to love this place, Ethan said after a while, but I think I forgot why. Rachel looked over at him. Me too. He was older now, but for a moment she saw the boy who used to jump off the dock and beg for hot chocolate after sunset. That boy was still in there, beneath the man he was becoming. When they reached the middle of the lake, Ethan stopped paddling. "Do you ever feel like we've just been surviving?" he asked. Rachel blinked. The question caught her off guard. "Yes," she said softly. "Since your father died, it's felt like we've just been getting through each day. Not really living, just surviving." He nodded. "That's how I've felt too, but lately, I don't know, it feels like maybe we're starting to come up for air." Rachel reached out and touched his arm. "That's all I've ever wanted for us, to breathe again." They floated there a while longer, letting the current gently carry them. No rush, no pressure, just stillness. That evening, after a simple dinner and a shared bottle of cider, they built a fire in the stone pit behind the house. Rachel wrapped a blanket around her shoulders while Ethan tossed a few logs on and coaxed the flames higher. They didn't speak for a while. The fire crackled, the stars blinked into view, and the lake glowed faintly in the moonlight. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence. "Moms, I want to tell you something. I don't know if it'll come out right, but I need to say it." Rachel turned to him, heart gently bracing. "Okay, I was angry at you after Dad died. I didn't know how to say it. I didn't even know why. I guess I hated seeing you in pain, but I didn't know how to fix it. And then I hated myself for not knowing what to do." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "You don't ever have to fix me, Ethan. We were both grieving. We still are." "I know," he whispered. "But you never gave up on me, even when I pulled away." "Because I love you," she said, her voice cracking. "That's what we do. We keep showing up for each other, even in the dark." They sat shoulder to shoulder, staring into the fire, letting the warmth sink into their bones, no longer just surviving, now finally beginning to heal. The next morning, Rachel woke early to the sound of birdsong and light streaming through the lake house windows. For the first time in years, she felt truly rested, not because she'd slept better, but because something in her chest was lighter. Last night had cracked something open between her and Ethan, something they hadn't even known they'd been holding shut. She found him on the dock, legs dangling over the edge, a mug of coffee cupped between his hands. He looked peaceful in the morning light, shoulders relaxed, gaze distant. She sat down beside him without saying anything. For a while, they just listened to the water lapping gently against the shore. "I don't think I ever told you," Ethan said quietly, "but I was there that night. When Dad collapsed." Rachel froze. Slowly, she turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "I came home early from practice. He was sitting in the kitchen sorting through old photos. He looked tired. I asked if he was okay, and he smiled and said, 'Just reminiscing.' Then he dropped the picture. When he bent down to pick it up, he just didn't get back up." Rachel's hands trembled slightly in her lap. "I called 911. I did everything they told me. But by the time they got there," his voice caught. "He was already gone." She placed a hand gently on his back. "Why didn't you tell me?" He shook his head. "You were barely holding it together. I couldn't add that weight. So I kept it to myself. But it's haunted me, Mom. Every day. I kept wondering, what if I'd gotten there 5 minutes earlier? What if I'd recognized the signs sooner?" Rachel pulled him into a hug. "Ethan, no! This isn't your fault. It was his heart. You know that. We all knew he had a condition, even if he downplayed it." "I know," he whispered. "But it doesn't make it easier." She held him tighter, letting him rest his head on her shoulder like he used to when he was small. "I wish you hadn't carried that alone," she said. We could have helped each other through it. I didn't know how, he murmured. I didn't even know I needed to. They sat in silence again, watching as the mist rose off the lake, golden and soft. Rachel felt a deep ache. Not just for Daniel, but for all the moments she and Ethan had missed while wrapped in their separate pain. Later that afternoon, they walked the old trail behind the lake house. The same one Daniel used to lead them through every fall, pointing out changing leaves and telling stories about trees as if they were old friends. The trail was overgrown now, but the memories were vivid. Ethan stopped near a mossy stump and crouched down. He used to sit here with me and show me how to carve wood with his pocket knife. Rachel smiled, and he always tried to make a boat, but ended up with something shaped like a carrot. He laughed, the sound rich and real. Yeah. He never laughed at me, though. He just said, every masterpiece starts as a block of nothing. Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. She missed Daniel with a depth that never truly faded, but in that moment she was grateful for the way his memory lived on through their son. That night, back inside, Rachel pulled out the old Polaroid camera. Let's take one, she said. A new memory, just for us. Ethan rolled his eyes, but smiled. They posed awkwardly in front of the fireplace, her in an oversized cardigan, him in his favorite flannel, and snapped the picture. As the film developed, Rachel wrote on the white border, the first day we started living again. She handed it to Ethan, who stared at the photo with a soft expression. Thanks, Mom, he said quietly, for bringing us here, for still showing up. Rachel leaned her head against his shoulder. Always. The next evening, Rachel decided to cook one of Daniel's favorite meals. Herb roasted chicken with garlic mashed potatoes and honey glazed carrots. She hadn't made it in almost 2 years, not since the funeral. But tonight felt different, lighter. She found Ethan outside, working quietly with a pocket knife on a small piece of driftwood he'd picked up earlier in the day. She smiled. Dinner in an hour, she called out. He looked up and gave her a nod, his expression soft. Smells amazing already. As the scent of rosemary filled the lake house, Rachel felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just cooking dinner. She was reclaiming something. A ritual, a rhythm, a part of their life that had been on pause for too long. At the table, Ethan took a bite and closed his eyes. God, I forgot how good this is. Rachel laughed. It's not as good as your dad's, remember? No way, you always made it better. He just liked to pretend he was the king of the kitchen. They both chuckled, and then the laughter faded into something quieter, more thoughtful. Ethan set his fork down and looked at her, his brow furrowed slightly. Can I ask you something personal? Rachel nodded. Did you ever feel angry after he died? She looked at him, surprised by the question. Yes, she admitted after a moment. More than I care to admit. Not because he left us. I know he didn't choose that. But because we didn't get a proper goodbye. Because I still had so many things I wanted to say, and maybe because I didn't realize how lost I'd feel without him. Ethan exhaled, as though he'd been holding that same anger inside himself. I think I hated the silence, he said. Not the silence in the house, the one between us. Like we both didn't know how to talk about him without breaking something. Rachel reached for his hand across the table. We're doing it now, she said gently. He gave a small, grateful smile. I know, it's hard to forgive grief for turning us into strangers for a while. She squeezed his hand. Then let's forgive it, and each other, starting tonight. After dinner, they cleaned the dishes side by side, just like they used to, the kind of quiet teamwork that spoke of familiarity, of family. As Ethan dried the last plate, he said, I've been thinking about something. Rachel raised a brow. And I go back to college. Maybe in the fall, finish my degree. A warm rush of emotion swept through her. That's wonderful, she said, smiling through glassy eyes. Are you sure you're ready? I'm not sure about anything, he said, but I think it's time. I think Dad would have wanted that. Rachel walked over and wrapped her arms around him. I think he'd be proud of you. He held her for a long moment before pulling back and reaching into his pocket. I found this today. It was a folded piece of paper, old, worn. When he opened it, Rachel recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. To my son, I hope you know that no matter what you do or who you become, I will always be proud of you. Just promise me one thing, never stop growing. Rachel brought a hand to her mouth, overcome. Where did you find this? She whispered. In the old jacket in the closet. I think he meant for me to find it eventually. They stood in silence, letting the words settle between them like a blessing. Rachel reached out and gently touched the edge of the note, her heart aching in the most beautiful way. That night, as she tucked the note into a frame and placed it on the mantle, she realized something. Daniel might be gone, but his love was still here. In their choices, in their growth, in every new beginning. And for the first time in a long time, she believed they were going to be okay. The following morning, Rachel awoke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the sheer curtains. For the first time in years, she hadn't dreamt of Daniel. Or rather, she hadn't woken up haunted by absence. Instead, there was a stillness, a kind of quiet peace that wrapped around her like a warm shawl. She walked barefoot into the kitchen, finding Ethan already there pouring 2 cups of coffee. You beat me to it, she said with a smile. Figured I owed you, he replied, handing her the mug. For last night, for everything, really. They sat at the kitchen table in easy silence, sipping slowly, looking out at the lake. The surface of the water was glass-like, the sky painted in gentle hues of pink and gold. Rachel broke the silence. Do you remember the last trip we took together before everything? Ethan nodded. Yeah, the cabin in Montana. Dad insisted on chopping firewood even though he threw his back out after 10 minutes. She laughed, the memory warming her. He was so stubborn, but that was a good weekend. Yeah, it wasn't. Another silence. But this one wasn't heavy. It was full of shared understanding, the kind that only exists between 2 people who've been through the same fire and walked out scarred, but still standing. I've been thinking, Rachel began slowly, about maybe renting that cabin again. Just for a weekend, one last time. Ethan looked at her surprised. You want to go back? I think I need to, she said. Not to dwell on what we lost, but to remember what we had and maybe to let go in the right way. He nodded, thoughtful. I'd like that. That evening, they packed a small overnight bag, filled a thermos with tea, and drove north. The cabin was still there, nestled among tall pines, slightly weathered but familiar. Inside, the same creaky floorboards, the same old fireplace, the same dusty stack of board games in the corner. Rachel stood in the center of the living room, taking it all in. It's smaller than I remember, Ethan said, glancing around. That's how memories work, she replied. They grow with time. They spent the weekend in quiet reflection, walking trails Daniel once loved, cooking over the fire, flipping through old photo albums they'd brought along. One evening, they lit a single candle and sat in silence, each holding a letter they'd written to Daniel. They didn't read them aloud. They didn't have to. When the candle burned low, they stepped outside and let the wind carry the ashes of their words across the lake. It wasn't closure. Closure, Rachel had learned, was a myth. But it was something else. Acceptance. A beginning, not of forgetting, but of living alongside the memory. Back at home a few days later, Rachel found herself standing at the threshold of Daniel's old study, the room she had avoided for 2 years. She opened the door slowly and stepped inside. It was just a room now. Not a shrine, not a womb. Just a room waiting for a new purpose. A week later, she began transforming it. She painted the walls a soft green, replaced the worn desk with a cozy reading chair, added a few potted plants. It became her space, a space for writing, for reflecting, for growing. Ethan helped her hang the framed note from Daniel, the one he had found in the coat pocket, right above the desk. It became the quiet heartbeat of the room, a gentle reminder of love that endured beyond absence. On a breezy spring afternoon, Rachel stood on the porch, watching Ethan load the last of his boxes into the back of his car. He had enrolled at the local university and found a small apartment near campus. You'll come by on Sundays, right? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. He grinned. Only if you promise to cook something better than microwave pizza. Rachel laughed, pulling him into a tight hug. Deal. As he drove away, she stood there, wind in her hair, hand resting on the porch rail, alone but not lonely. Because she knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of healing, brings of independence, of rediscovery, of love that could evolve. She turned and stepped back inside, the light of the afternoon casting a soft glow across the house she'd rebuilt, brick by brick, heart by heart, with her son. Together, grief doesn't come with a map, and healing rarely follows a straight line. Sometimes it takes the quiet strength of a mother, sometimes the silent resilience of a son, but more often, it's the small, brave choices we make each day, the conversations we dare to have, the spaces we allow to change, the love we learn to give again, that slowly guide us back toward the light. If you've ever lost someone, if you've ever felt like the foundation of your world cracked beneath you, know this: you are not alone. There's no perfect way to grieve, but there is a way forward. And it often begins with honesty, with grace, and with the courage to simply begin again. If this story touched something in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What helped you take the first step after a difficult loss? Leave a comment, share with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this one. Because healing, like love, is something we do together.